What are the side effects? Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea are very common side effects, but what are the other untoward side effects of taking that to your body?
Um, I would say it can cause blindness if
Wow.
you take enough. So that, and again, it can die. It
And
can.
does that come from, overdosing and or not appropriately monitoring the dose of medication? Is there a blood test that you should be taking to follow up with certain things?
Well, for example, so the most extreme that I mentioned is irreversible retinopathy or blindness. Basically, yes, it's due to a high dose that is actually FDA approved, but it also mentions that you need to check in with your physician on a regular basis, and it's for a small amount of patients who would require that high dose on a regular basis. So the thing with hydroxychloroquine for COVID at this time, it's a temporary experiment. Okay, so it's not one of those drugs you want to take just to prevent the possibility, like Trump was saying. The use of hydroxychloroquine in COVID patients is an experiment right now. They're not sure how it's working. So far, they have not seen any changes. Speaking of studies, they have done a few placebo-controlled studies on in France and in China, and they compared the use of just all the standard of care that you would normally give a patient that has the symptoms of COVID, and then they would add the hydroxychloroquine. So that's the study. And both of those studies report very little to no improvement or significant difference in the control group versus the drugged group. Actually, the China study even further mentioned that there were more adverse reactions and side effects in the drug group. So,
Are there any other specific interactions or adverse reactions other than nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea?
oh,
And you
yeah.
mentioned blindness with retinopathy. Was there tingling, numbness?
The cardiac effects that I mentioned, cardiomyopathy, arrhythmia, or irregular heart rates that could lead to life-threatening complications. Yes, tingling, there could be psoriasis, worsening of that, myopathy, or just weakness and muscle weakness. Oh, and hypoglycemia, like I mentioned, if you are a diabetic and taking insulin or a diabetic medication. One
So
more.
where would you direct someone, Cheryl, to go and look up hydroxychloroquine for themselves? What's a really good website for them to go to?
What I like to go to is straight to the FDA because we live in America and FDA is our regulatory agency for drugs, for the safety and efficacy of drugs. That's what we as pharmacists and healthcare professionals use. I don't know if I want to endorse any other websites. I mean, there's always
No,
doctors.
I wanted that because I think it's, and as you've heard me multiple times, I tell people exactly where my source is. And I want to make sure that the people that are watching and that might potentially share know that they need to go directly to these websites. And so you mentioned the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and they are our regulatory body. What is also very interesting to me, the time that it normally takes for a drug to be approved. So it's interesting, right? We are now in week 11. It's a drug typically just approved within 11 weeks when it first comes to market. I know that you also do a lot of administrative pharmaceutical work as well. What is the normal process for the people watching in order to have a drug approved?
It's all clinical trials that are very controlled in a laboratory setting, testing the drug on healthy people.
So Meaty, who's healthy, I don't have malaria, but I'm going to take this drug just to make sure it doesn't create some weird other impact on me that's going to be seen as a side effect, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I might be wrong because I don't work with the FDA.
Okay. No, that's
So
fine.
forgive me on this. So yeah, it would be a volunteer basis for
Hmm.
healthy patients.
Mhm.
who are volunteering their bodies. Okay.
Yep. And people need to understand that's a whole, what we call IRB, an institutional review board. It's, I mean, we all remember, know about the Tuskegee experiment and all these other things that have happened in the healthcare community, where now there are safety nets in place that help to ensure that any person who was going through a drug trial, that he or she is aware of all the potential side effects, that he or she is also sometimes fiscally reimbursed. He or she is also ensured that in the event there is a negative outcome or a negative reaction, that those healthcare bills would be covered within this clinical trial. And so it's a lot of information, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of due diligence that goes through having clinical trials for drugs. So I think that's important for people to know. So with this whole expedited and understandable that we have a sense of urgency to find, you know, a drug that is going to impact COVID-19 and or even a vaccine, it is definitely a long process. So it's not something you just, you know, pop like candy for a week and a half and see what happens.
Right.
What's the other part of getting a drug approved?
Depending on the urgency of the drug, or depending on the urgency of the disease, it could be shortened, but usually we're talking months to years of these trials. So, and then we got to make sure they're all published, and then the FDA reviews, and they usually have a 30 to 90 to sometimes 180-day review a window before they can, you know, make a decision. Again, I don't work for the FDA. I'm projecting from the CMS perspective, because once the drug is actually approved by the FDA, then there's a whole process again for determining if the drug would actually be reimbursed or paid for by your insurance company. So we're talking about 4 to 5 years from idea to
Implementation.
to getting it on the market and getting it on the shelves in the pharmacy.
Yeah.
For
And I think
example,
it's important for people to realize too, everybody, I think I talked about this yesterday, you know, Viagra, right? You know, that was, you know, the infamous blue pill that everybody is aware of, but it actually was developed as an antihypertensive, as a blood pressure medication. And the other impact, the other side effect, which was a favorable side effect, that's when the actual medication was then changed. And people also realized the indication for it then went from being an antihypertensive to something to enhance, you know, sexual activity. And so people need to understand that drugs can also, even once it's been approved for one thing, can over a period of time, you start to realize all these other side effects are happening. Then it also has a completely different purpose, you know. And so it's important, even using that example, a lot of people ended up having a lot of heart issues because those older gentlemen were very excited about this drug and very excited about the impact that it had on their personal lives, not realizing that if you don't take it as exactly prescribed, they were then dropping their blood pressure. Right. And by dropping their blood pressure, they were having cardiac issues because they were so excited about the other side effect that Viagra had. And so if you remember, there was many warnings that said, do not take this medication without talking to your physician first, because many people were seeking to get Viagra, as you indicated, on non-prescribed routes, you know, the black market, if you will. And I think that's something that we need to share, because when you have a senior leader speaking of, he said, I'm taking it, the other lay person, when you have nearly 90,000 people in less than 12 weeks that have passed away, why wouldn't they want to go and get it? And so that's why I think it's important to have people like yourself and pharmacists on to share what is a normal process for drugs and why it is very dangerous with the rhetoric and the narrative that people are sharing without giving full context and concrete data. So
absolutely.
what are your thoughts?
Oh gosh.
What are your thoughts about the messaging?
If there's one thing I could emphasize, is there is no drug cure for COVID right now. There's no drug that is FDA approved to treat COVID. Everything is experimental right now. And
I think you should say that one more time.
Can I share my screen real quick?
Sure. I think if you can, sure. You know, as you're doing that, I think it's just important. Again, there is no approved drug to treat and or cure COVID-19. Again, there is no FDA approved drug that is here to treat COVID-19. Go ahead, dear.
While several drug trials are ongoing, there's currently no proof that hydroxychloroquine or any other drug can cure or prevent COVID-19. And the misuse of hydroxychloroquine can cause serious side effects and illnesses and even lead to death. The World Health Organization is coordinating efforts to evaluate and develop medicines to treat COVID-19. Everything is experimental right now. And the experiments are in controlled environments in
Correct.
healthcare facility. There are some other drugs out there that have purported, even some herbal remedies out there. There's a lot of talk about
zinc.
Well, zinc is more of just an immune booster. So there isn't really much about that being as a cure or a treatment. No, it's more just, actually my physician recommended I just take an extra zinc supplement, to be honest. So yeah, increase your immune system by staying healthy, eating healthy, keeping your distance, keeping your social distancing. Those things are helping to ensure that your immune system is staying strong and not being compromised by anything. Like, you could still catch a cold from someone. So just keep your distance, right? Wash your hands, cook your own food if you can. Yeah, increase your vitamin C. Thank you.
Wear your mask.
Yes, ma'am. You make it look so glamorous. I love the pictures you can post. Beautiful eyes and the freckles, and it's just perfect. So yeah, people are making the masks a whole fashion statement now. Embrace this new situation we're in. It's not going anywhere. Stay home. I've been staying home. That's my thing. Social distancing, staying 6 feet away from each other. If you're still in an enclosed environment, like in a small room, and you're keeping your 6 feet away, if you don't have your mask on, even if you do, you can still increase the risk of being contagious or contracting it. Another thing is, we didn't talk about the other medication, remdesivir, but
you can go for it.
Well, just quickly, that one is also an experimental drug, only given in the hospital. It's an injection, and it's really truly reserved for patients who are symptomatic and severe.
And those are the patients that I'm definitely familiar with, that are in an ICU setting, where you have, very well observed patients. You're on a heart monitor, they're checking your pulse ox, making sure your oxygenation is where it needs to be. And the doctors there are drawing lab work, probably daily or twice a day, if not even more frequent, to make sure, again, your liver and kidney functions are maintaining a very healthy, productive, active number, if you will. And so, again, I think you sharing that, because a lot of people also think, again, oh, well, we have this, so then I can go outside and not worry about the 6 feet, the social distancing, the face covering. And so if you can put your screen back up for me, if you don't mind, is that it is all still experimental. There is nothing that has been approved. And even if our senior leader is taking the medication, we can only hope and trust that his own physician is actively monitoring him daily. Let's not forget, you and I both know about propofol, which, unfortunately killed Michael Jackson. He had the means and the ability to have a private physician. And unfortunately, this physician, either by pressure and or by choice, decided to help Michael Jackson and gave him propofol, which is a medication that you and I both know is a short acting, but definitely lethal drug that is given to basically put people to sleep. Unfortunately, he did, years later. And now you're realizing, well, my question had always been, how did he even get that? To get propofol administered at home, because that is something that you definitely get in a controlled environment. I mean, I'm speaking, ICU or in the operating room where you have an anesthesiologist is there, not even just a regular nurse or surgeon. You normally have an anesthesiologist around when you are administering that drug. So thank you for this slide. Again,